The hosts and guests on Everything's Messy podcast are not licensed healthcare professionals. The discussions in our episodes are not personalized medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for medical guidance. Never delay seeking professional medical advice or emergency assistance because of our podcast. We encourage consulting with a healthcare professional before making any significant health changes. By listening to our podcast, you agree to the disclaimer. Thank you for listening to Everything's Messy. Hey, welcome to Everything's Messy podcast, where we celebrate the beautiful but messy life experiences that most, if not all, people go through. Get ready to embark on an exciting journey through the raw and unfiltered stories of everyday people. Here, we dive into messy realities of life, from making messy mistakes to triumphs and everything in between. Are you sensing a theme? That's right, it's messy. But this just isn't about the mess. It's about finding strength and resilience in the midst of it all. We'll explore how health, fitness, and wellness play a crucial role in navigating life's twists and very messy turns. And we'll challenge conventional systems, because sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the greatest discoveries. Join us as we embrace the messy, beautiful, and endlessly fascinating stories. Each episode is a testament to the power of our messy journeys and the beauty that emerges from the mess. So grab your favorite beverage, coffee, sparkling water, whatever it may be, and prepare to be inspired. Are you ready? Let's get messy. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Everything's Messy podcast. I am your messy host, Sarah. Okay, well, I often say that I like to get messy, but I also know the lanes that I'm very well versed in, and I know there's some lanes that I don't belong in. But I do like to be messy. Today, I'm going to veer into a little bit of a different lane, all having to do with wellness, but this will specifically be talking about fitness, kind of. Now, I don't really talk about the actual ins and outs of fitness. I don't talk about macros. I talk about my own experience with it and why it's important and, eating X amount of grams of protein a day to be the weight that you want, things like that. But I don't get specific and I won't get specific in this episode either. But I was having a conversation with a couple of my friends, and I also talked to my daughters. I'm always talking to them. And I just think this is a topic that, especially for women, we can sort of navigate through. And like I said, I do like to get a little messy. So I'm going to veer a little bit into the fitness side, but really tie it into our inner voice and our triggers and things like that. It's really... For a lot of fitness coaches out there, nutrition experts, they do the work with you that, they'll perform or they'll create a plan, they'll create a nutritional plan. A good coach will sit down and, check in with you once a week and see if you stayed on target and, have to, pivot from a certain exercise. You can do, they'll do that for you. Or, they might say, okay, you've done this. Now we're going to add more weight. They get very specifics down to what I like to call the outward path or the outward work, right? And there's really, there's tangible, measurable ways that you can see if those things are working. You can see if you are, your pants feel different. You can obviously step on the scale and see if there's any motion there. You can, just gauge your energy and just different thing. Are you sleeping better? There's very, big ways to measure those things to see if you're progressing or not progressing. But what I'm really going to talk about, and again, I am veering a little bit into the fitness space, but it really comes down to, and we've talked about this before, really diet culture, our inner voice, and, trying to stick to a plan, trying to navigate burnout, which we're always talking about here on the podcast, and trying to, make it to where we're still living life. We've got that 80-20, and then giving ourselves grace. And I'm going to talk about giving ourselves too much grace in a little bit. But so again, when we're talking about fitness, there's very measurable, tangible things that we can do to see if we're progressing, to see if we're not. We can, track our macros and our micros. We can track the amount of food that we're eating. We can, weigh the food. We can, decide if it's too much, too little. But what happens, and I'm speaking to myself and, the women, like I said, that I had conversations with, what happens when you're going strong And all of a sudden you have a bad day. I've talked about the inner toddler on this podcast. Sometimes she wins and she gets her, cookies or cake or whatever she shouldn't have, but she's throwing a fit. The inner toddler, she gets loud, and sometimes I give in to her. But what happens when we have a bad day and we've put in the work to, you know, do the exercising, count the macros, make sure we're doing the good grocery list, the whole quote unquote eating clean, which doesn't necessarily you're doing it the right way, but that's a different episode. I, so let me tell you how the conversation started, right? Had a bad day. I don't ever feel like I'm entitled to anything, but I do feel sometimes the narrative in my head is I've earned this. If I had a shitty day or it's been a long week, or sometimes I like to tell myself, I've earned this cookie, or if I've earned something that I want to go after. And I don't think there's anything wrong per se with that mentality, other than I think it does set us up for this next part, which I'm very familiar with. And that's the inner dialogue where we start to guilt ourselves, where we start to think we need to be perfect, not consistent. And, one meal, one bad meal, I had the cookie or whatever, turns into a whole day of bad food, turns into a whole week of letting myself off the hook. All of a sudden, a whole month has gone by and I have earned the right. I've earned this month to just do what I want to do. And this might be a little bit of tough love. Definitely there's a day, there's a time of rest. There's times where we need to just shut out the door, the noise, shut the door, make it okay. Definitely there is a time. But there's also time where I do think we can push ourselves and not give in, right? Delay that instant gratification. And when we have that narrative of, I earned it, I deserve this, I feel like sometimes, not all the time, and again, depending on the circumstances, we're definitely setting ourselves up maybe for that guilt complex to come in and just that inner dialogue it wrecks me for sure. But so let me give you sort of an example. It's not the food that triggers me per se. It's not, you know, I ate this Oreo and now I'm so miserable. No, because it's probably good and I'm happy I ate the Oreo. But what happens is that when I give into that trigger, that craving, what that does is that triggers the guilt complex in me. So I might be okay for 30 seconds, 5 minutes, heck, even that evening, but I'm not going to be okay when I wake up in the middle of the night or I wake up the next morning and it triggers me to just have this negative narrative that I'm telling myself. My gosh, you ruined everything. I can't believe you did that. Why did you've been doing so good? And then it's kind of a domino effect. And so then I go through that narrative cycle. And then the next step, or the next level, if you will, is, well, you blew it last night. What does it matter today? Well, it does matter. It matters because think of it in a whole scheme of, a month, right? One bad meal, one bad day, even if it's the whole day out of, how 30 days, sometimes, 1 month it's 28 days, the other is 31 days. But out of that much, I had one bad day. My guilt complex, my narrative shouldn't be, well, you blew it. Who cares? No, my narrative should be kinder to myself in the sense that, yes, I'm going to give myself grace in that, but I'm not going to give in to myself. I'm not going to let that toddler win, and I'm going to get back into my routine as the next meal, right? At the next meal, I'm getting back in. And I like to say sometimes I have an excuse. My blood sugar was 300, or I was doing something that, I had a bad day, whatever it is. I'm always good to find the excuses, and I'm calling myself out here. But I think a lot of this comes from diet culture in general. And I'm not going to, talk badly, because I do talk badly about it, but it's really the narrative that's put in our head as I start to unpack how this negative narrative kind of settled in me. I mean, this started when I was really young, probably even self-consciously just hearing, women can't eat as much as men. Women have to keep their figures. Women have to, if you want to be skinny, you eat less. And all of that, in my opinion, is garbage. Now, I realize that we have come from a place of calories in, calories out, and how are we doing that? But I will tell you that from somebody who, when they were younger, thought if, and it worked, by the way, that if I just didn't eat, then I didn't gain the weight. And also, what I've shared with you with my diabulimia of withholding that insulin and, wrecking havoc on my body that way. But I thought I thought I was doing great. Hey, I was skinny, right? Because that's how we measure society, especially in women. Most even people that are labeled, skinny fat, they still tend to have that not fit, but that they're skinny, they're not overweight, and so they must be okay. And that, along with the magazines and movies and television and everything and even now social media, how you should look and all of these things, all of that goes into the soup, as I like to call it. And it, churns in my mind. And all of this bad information I'm using for my inner dialogue. And it's so hard to stop and hold those thoughts captive because I'm just so trained and indoctrinated and used to saying, yeah, just don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, which is just a vicious cycle. And as we get older, by the way, doesn't work and it's not good for us. Hey, messy warriors. So if you're looking for some help, some guidance, how can I get back on track? Maybe you're newly diagnosed T1D or are a parent of a newly diagnosed child of T1D. Check out my website. There's lots of stuff that I'm offering, lots of support. Look, the T1D world is so much to unpack. It's going to take a long time to get in and settled. So if you need some help, reach out. Let me know, and I'm happy to start you on your journey, or maybe you need some guidance on how to make a better plan. Whatever it is you're looking for, check out everythingsmessywellness.com. And as always, keep it messy. And I think that's part of the thing. I know there's a pretty good wellness coach, female wellness coach online, and she on Instagram, and she's really good about saying, people tell me, wow, you sure eat a lot because we're supposed to be dainty women who aren't supposed to eat a lot. Well, here's the thing. She's massively working out. She's training. And if she didn't give herself the fuel and the calories that she needed, not only she wouldn't look as fit and as muscular as she does, but she would be tired and, struggling. And where do I find this energy? No, she's feeding her body the appropriate amount of fuel for the kind of workouts that she's doing, but yet still being told, wow, you sure eat a lot. I mean, that's crazy to me that in this day and age, not only are we still judging women for what they're eating or not eating, that she would be told this information. And oh, by the way, she looks incredibly amazing to be in her 40s. So she shouldn't take flack from anyone because she's worked at her body. She's worked at doing her metabolism different. She's counted those macros. She's been consistent with it. But all of that to say, who cares how much she's eating? She's taking care of herself. She's doing right by her body. And it's different with everyone, right? It's that whole comparison, gosh, if you want the enemy to win, you want that devil to come in and just get at you, it is comparing. There are so many times, especially when I was younger, that I would compare myself to like a 5'10", 5'11" model. Okay, I'm 5'4". My body structure is completely different. I'm pretty stocky. But when you start to compare myself to a 5'10", 5'11" model, I'm never going to be that. I had to rework the self-love for myself and just be okay with me at 5'4", my stocky physique, but learn that I'm going to be or still becoming the best version of that stature. And I think it's very detrimental, especially to younger women. You see, whether it's athletes, maybe the tall basketball girls, maybe it's the dancers, it's the actresses, but, we're starting to talk about Ozempic face and what's too skinny. And that's a tool that I feel you can use, learning how to eat better and exercise while you're using it, but it shouldn't be your be all end all. That's just my opinion. But as we come out of this, now they're prescribing it for everyone everywhere. we're not putting in the work and we're not changing that inner dialogue. We are still comparing. We still think this is how we're supposed to look, even if we're, 5 feet tall, but we think we should be the 5'10" model. That's just not the gift that I was granted with. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. But then that means I can't compare. The only person that you should be comparing yourself to is yourself, right? Whatever you did yesterday in your workouts, in your job, in your relationships, whatever you did yesterday, the next day you should be trying to be better, whatever it was. Take whatever you learned on the former day, apply it to the next day, and be better, be a better version. Learn to be self-aware and check in with yourself. And, maybe your relationship you need to work on. Maybe it's at your job and with your performance. Maybe it's just in general in life. Are you self-abandoning? Are you self-sabotaging? All of these things, we should only be looking at ourselves for that. Now, I am the first to say, and again, it's taking me so long. It's been 4 years since I've had my heart attack. 2022, I had my heart attack. I have been so low with myself, my expectation of myself, what I wish and regretted that I did and should have done when I was younger, having to sit with all that mess and come out and be like, okay, I didn't do that. This is what I'm dealing with now. How can I make this part better? All of that has been crushing at times, like truly crushing. And, sitting with that ick of just what did I do? What could I have stopped? I've now come out of that and not so much blaming myself for all of it. There are definitely parts I hold myself accountable to, which keeps me accountable going forward. But there's also things, well, number one, there was a lot of education that I wasn't given. But number two, it's even before I was dealing with a lot of these medical problems, it was my environment and things that I was I don't want to admit this because it would be admitting that my stepmom was correct, but I never used to think it was a big deal, and I was much younger, much, much younger, and she was right, but I used to love to read Cosmopolitan magazine, and she'd always take it away from me because she didn't want me reading that, and there's good reason. It was very harsh on women and their body and what you should be doing. There was also a lot of sexual things that it was talking about, and at that age, I had no business reading something like that. But I never understood at that age, this was about women and let me see it, and I want to be the girl on the cover and have this fashion. And really all that did was set me up for many, many, many years of just comparing myself and then turning that around and hating myself. There were many years and not just because of the magazine. There were a lot of things, that I had to learn to love myself for. But if you add in that comparison part, that's a whole other beast that you just don't need to deal with it. And it's hard, right? It's everywhere. And sometimes I even have to hold my thought captive and stop it and shut it down and be like, okay, you're comparing. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that, she can run 5 miles and you can walk 2. That doesn't matter. You're trying to be the best version of what you can do, right? I'd like to think that I have definitely been able to increase the amount of weight that I can lift, the reps, the things that I can do. But I will tell you, it is still very, very difficult for me to be a full push-up. I've actually switched to just wall push-ups because it hurts my shoulders. I've shared with you guys about my frozen shoulder and, the destruction that I feel that it's given me. There's a lot of things that I guess I could continue to make excuses about, but then I realize I'm not making an excuse in this particular circumstance. I'm allowing my body to tell me what it can do, what it can perform for me, and what it can't. And if it can't, I have to listen to my body because what I don't want is an injury. I don't want to be injured to then to go back and start at square one, to not be able to do it at all. So I'd like to say, and I fight less now, but I used to fight with my body a lot. I used to push it. And I used to think I was doing a good thing by pushing and pushing and pushing. And again, it depends on what circumstance. Now, I am all about, and I said this at the beginning, giving yourself some grace, giving yourself a moment to rest, a moment to pause. But again, tough love coming at you. It really is dependent on what you're giving yourself grace for. And is this a moment where you could maybe not give in to instant gratification and where you could, you know, demand a little bit of higher excellence of yourself? Now, if you can't, that's okay. And there's no judgment and there's no shame and there's no blame. But if you could maybe just give yourself that little bit of tough love and just see where that's going to take you. I don't want people to exchange, I'm just giving myself grace and I can't do it, and continue to use that a little more and a little more and a little more. Like going back to the example, okay, one bad meal is not going to, be a detriment in the grand scheme of things, but has it turned into a whole month now? Has it turned into 3 months now? Are we, having sporadic workouts whenever we feel like it? Are we not eating the way that we think we should be eating? And let me tell you this too. I think, and again, this is diet culture. I think it's a mistake. And again, this is my opinion, but I think it's a mistake when we tell ourselves, oh my gosh, Friday's my cheat day. I can have whatever I want. Because I think that trains our brain, at least in my brain, it trained my brain that this wasn't a lifestyle change, that this was a diet and I was going to do it for a while. And while I'm doing it, I get rewarded. And so in my head, I thought, great, cheat day's Friday. That's awesome. Can't wait. And I really think sometimes that set me up for failure because the one Friday turned into a whole weekend, turned into a whole week. You throw a bad day in there, you throw a bad blood sugar number in there, you throw, kids are sick, we're running around, and now it becomes super comfortable because, again, what are humans designed to always seek? Comfort. We want the least friction part of anything. We desire and need the comfort. Throw that word discipline. The discipline comes in where we're not going to allow it to be comfortable all the time. In fact, we're going to grow when we're uncomfortable. But nobody wants to be uncomfortable. Nobody wants that. Some might be better at others of sitting in the uncomfortableness, but nobody really wants it. I mean, come on, let's be honest. But we do know the benefits that we get from it. It stretches us. It grows us. We can do hard things because we can. We absolutely can do hard things. But sometimes, like I said, that inner toddler says, I don't want to. And then I don't want to for that day turns into I don't want to the next day. And then we're constantly giving into that toddler inside. And now we're completely off kilter. And now we have to go way back to the beginning of our journey and start over again because we let that one meal get us off track. And again, it's not the one meal. For me, it's not the food. It's the guilt that comes after that and the excuses that I might make and the I've earned this mentality instead of just keeping low, put my nose to the grindstone and keep working. Now, again, I talk a lot about pausing and resting and allowing yourself to do that. And this is not going against that. This is just talking about the tough love part when we can, when we should push ourselves, when we don't maybe need to give ourselves the extra grace. It's a fine line. You have to, know your body well enough, I think, to, know when to stop and know when not to stop. So, and, so much lately, I just want to take a minute, super quick. When we talk about burnout, when we naturally pause, or when we should naturally pause, and all of the pushing ourselves sometimes is not healthy. It really isn't. But every week I have people tell me, I listened to your thing on burnout. They ask the question, how long are you in burnout? I often say, and because there's research to back this up, sometimes burnout can be 1 to 3 years. Mind blown. 1 to 3 years. Which is why I'm so passionate about getting right with burnout, and it's not going to be avoidable, but we need to get tools in place to make it shorter, be able to combat it, sit in it, and move on. And that's what I'm trying to tell people with my burnout, with pausing, with giving yourself permission to rest. This is not that. This is, are we being a little too easy on ourselves with the grace? Are we being too hard on ourselves with our inner dialogue? And how much is this programmed from our childhood or young adult, and how we can just shut off the noise, get back to basics. And, you need to work with a fitness coach, a nutrition coach. Look, they are out there. They are amazing. There are great ones out there. But to me, the outside package, the trackable stuff, the tangible stuff, I don't want to say that's the easy part, but I don't I'm okay with the working out. Yeah, sometimes I have to push myself a little farther to get out there. Maybe I'm a little tired, I don't want to, but I actually really enjoy working out. I love working out. I love playing golf. I love, those things, being with my kids, doing whatever. I don't have a problem so much with activity. Although I'm not going to lie, it's very nice to sometimes just sit down and not move. That's my rest. But I typically don't have a problem with that part. My problem comes from the inside mess of how I stay on track with the food. The food triggers me. Let me raise that. The guilt complex triggers me, along with letting myself off the hook with the food. And that's the battle that I go through. And I know I'm not alone in this. I know there's a lot of people that, working out doesn't seem to be the issue. It's the food. And again, maybe you've had a hell of a workout. Maybe you were 2 hours in the gym and then you pick your kids up from school and it's like, hey, I want a cheeseburger, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, hell yeah, I worked 2 hours in the gym. I'm going to go eat that cheeseburger. Not saying that you shouldn't. You've obviously burned the calories, but what are you going to feel like after you do? Is that guilt monster going to come in? Is it going to trigger other things to spiral out of? Oh, I had a cheeseburger yesterday. I had pizza. I don't eat. Typically, I don't eat pizza. It's very few and far between when I do have pizza because I probably tend to overeat it. So I know my weakness. And so if I have the mentality of I worked out 2 hours today, hell yeah, I'm going to have that pizza. And I do that every day. I'm kind of my own worst enemy in that, and I'm not doing myself any favors, right? On the flip side of that, if you're working out 2 hours a day, you better not be starving yourself because your body is not going to let go of the fat maybe that you're trying to burn because it's in survival mode. It's thinking you're starving it. So women who think, 1,200 calories a day is enough and they're doing heavy workouts and, doing maybe HIIT and cardio and all these things, they're not eating enough. They're not eating enough. We have to fuel that body. We have to burn we have to create that metabolism to burn. If I just wish, a lot of a lot of men get away with this. I don't know a lot of men that are commenting on other men's feeds about, oh my gosh, that's how much you eat. I don't think that's a thing. Maybe it is. But for women, there's a lot of people that are vocal. Men and women are vocal about how much a woman is eating. And how about this? First of all, none of your damn business. But second of all, you don't know what I have discovered in my body and the calories that I need and the fat that I need and the protein that I need and how sometimes hard it is to get all of those things. And so I'm going to eat. There was like a what do they call it? An example of a diet or, how you should be eating if you want to lean out instead of bulk up. And there was a ton of food on this example. It had like 3 egg whites plus 1 real egg, cottage cheese and berries for breakfast. And then for lunch, it was like turkey burger, zucchini, and berries, and then a shake, and then dinner was a full meal, and then a shake before dinner. That's a lot of food. That's the part I struggle with. I don't give myself enough food because it's really hard for me to eat that much because I'm not at the point where I'm burning. In fact, I probably am, but my stomach, I just can't eat that much. And I know that's something internal. I need to be eating more. That's a lot of food. And, they always talk about, well, then you won't have cravings, you won't be hungry, you'll constantly be full. And that's great. It is the fact that a lot of times I feel like I need to choke it down. And I have an aversion to, if I'm full, I'm gonna probably be sick. I can't hold that much food. And so I just struggle with myself with that. So it's really food-based and guilt-based and inner narrative based that I have the problem with. It's not so much the technical part of the fitness and nutrition. No, not the nutrition, the fitness. I don't want to confuse the two terms. And I know I'm not the only one that suffers from this. Not suffers, but is touched by this. I think if we can truly, you know, love ourselves, and I know that's such an overused term and cliche term, but it's especially as women, especially as caretakers, especially, and then I dealt so many years with self-abandonment. I dealt so many years with self-sabotage, and let me give you an example of what self-abandonment looks like. So I have two kids. At the time, I had two kids under two in diapers. I was, barely keeping my head above water. And, um, you know, I would prepare dinner, or I would go make an extra trip to the store if we didn't have something, or I would, do something for my husband. And I'm not picking on him at all, but I would do all these things for other people, but I wasn't taking a walk. I had the energy to go and serve others, but I had nothing left for myself, when in fact I should have been walking first. Maybe I don't need to have that extra trip to the grocery store. Maybe dinner tonight's going to be breakfast for dinner. It's going to be super simple. And then I'm not going to self-abandon myself, because I know the bigger picture is I need to take that walk. And for years, that has not been my mentality, to the point where making sure that, again, this is not now, and this hasn't been for a while, and I'm not picking on him, but making sure his uniforms were washed and cleaned, because I felt like I needed to be the good wife, and I am the good wife. But then I would be wearing the same t-shirt for 3 weeks because I wasn't doing my laundry, nor did I care. And I was just self-abandoning. And that, again, it wasn't his fault. And I needed to find better balance between a wife that I wanted to be, a mother that I wanted to be, because all of that can include taking care of myself. But there was so many years of self-abandonment. And my kids and my husband didn't know that's what I was doing. I was just doing the stuff that I needed to do. And then, coming out of my heart attack and beating myself up and saying, I don't even know why it matters now if I'm going to exercise, and sort of self-sabotaging, who cares? What does it matter? And just not doing it at all. I had to get my mind right. I had to do the work inside my head. And it started with just a very small step, a promise to myself that I wasn't going to break. Just one promise, whether that was go take a walk, go take a shower, go to whatever it was. I was going to keep my promise for the day until it became a natural priority that I didn't even have to think of. And then I would add another one. And that's hard. That's hard because life happens, shit happens. But it took pretty much reprogramming everything inside of me. And again, I still struggle it with a little bit. If I'm going out and I'm ready to go do my workout and it's, hey mom, can you do this? Hey mom, I can do that. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to go work out. And when we're done, we'll circle back and I'll do what you need. Because a lot of times, one little domino leads to, oh, can you also do this? Can you also do this? And then with my brain all over, oh, look, a squirrel. Now I've got 10 other things that I've been distracted with, and I didn't keep that promise to myself. So I still have to be very, very intentional. I try very much so it doesn't cut into time with my kids or what they may need, to do my workouts early before they get up, so I have that time. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Or sometimes we're up early because we've got things to do. The whole day goes by. I haven't been able to get a walk or a workout in. And now, it's dinner time or whatever. At some point, I have to say, time out and sort of zoom out to see the bigger picture. Why do I need to keep this promise to myself? Why do I need to do this for long term? Because again, if you just say, well, what's one workout? But you're going to use that and now it's a month without workouts. You have to keep that promise to yourself. And that's how you build the boundary. That's how you make it normal. And again, this took a lot of work. Like I said, it's been 4 years since my heart attack. And I've talked about this too. In the beginning of trying to set these boundaries, I had terrible mom guilt. That's my job. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. My purpose is to be their mom and be there for them and do the things that they need. And while that's true to a point, that doesn't mean I self-abandon myself to the point where I'm going to have another heart attack. Obviously, this was a huge wake-up call. I needed to do something that changed. And I wasn't very good at it in the beginning. But slowly, I got stronger. I got better. I saw the wealth and the importance of doing these workouts. My kids started to see it. They also started to see me taking breaks where I just needed a minute to myself or 5 minutes, or I'm going to go, stretch or do other things that I can quiet my mind and they're not a part of. It's not because I don't want to be a part of them. It's not because I just can't handle being a mom. No, it's because I'm building in these habits. I'm building in these routines that I know are going to pay off. They're going to be that compound interest that we talk about. It's going to pay off in the long run. But as sometimes I'm so zoomed in, I forget about that compound interest and I get distracted and one thing leads to another. And then, like I said, the guilt comes in, the self-sabotage, the self-abandonment, and now it's been a month. And what happened to doing the things that I promised myself I would do for myself? And you can apply that to anything. And I am the first person to tell you it's really hard to keep going when you're not seeing results. I know that. I still struggle with that. I am not the weight that I want to be. I'm still on my journey. I've had a few tell me, yeah, it's been a bit. Why, you don't look that much different. No, but I feel better. I'm sleeping better. I have a lot more stamina than I have had ever. I feel better, but it's, other things stacked against me. Insulin resistance, leptin resistance, high blood sugar, inflammation, high cortisol. Like I'm trying to work on all of these simultaneously and it's just taken a little bit. And I don't have the perfect formula, so I'm still throwing Jello at the wall to see what will stick. But I'm a work in progress. And for the most part, I have enjoyed the journey, but a lot of the journey has been messy. And one of the things that I did need to be softer with myself with, well, and again, comparison, there are, a few of my friends who have, they haven't had heart attacks, but they've gone through weight loss and things like that. And I beat myself up. How come they can do it? How come she's down 20 pounds and I'm only down 3? What is the matter? Why can't I do more? And so all of these things. And then there's been, going down deep of the darkness and be like, well, I just won't eat. Maybe that'll bring down my blood sugar. That'll, I'll lose weight that way. Well, that doesn't work. Not only is it not healthy, let's be honest, but for women in perimenopause who are getting older, that just doesn't work. Maybe for some, I will tell you for me, it just doesn't work. And it's not healthy. That's not how I want to do it. But sometimes I get so frustrated at that number. And again, the number on the scale we have decided as a society that that's how we tell ourselves we are, doing good or we're not. And that's not true either. Again, if your pants fit a little different, if you have energy, if you're able to keep up and play 18 holes of golf, that's a different measurement that a lot of people don't think of. They just see the number on the scale and they go, oh, got to shave off 500 calories, go into deficit or whatever you're doing. And I'm not saying that for every time is what people, can't do, but I am saying 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be because you're not eating enough. You're not eating enough. And maybe your macros aren't specific to your body. Maybe you need actually, more fat or less fat, more protein. It just depends. And again, that's where you would work with a fitness and nutrition expert to do those things. It also can change in a month. As a woman, there's sometimes I feel like I'm down 7 pounds. And then when it gets closer to that time of the month, I'm up, 5.5 pounds, and I haven't done anything different. And so it's very frustrating. It changes. It's, putting in the reps, putting in the consistency, quieting that mind. And it it's making sure I'm, you know, keeping my promises to myself. It's making sure that I do not compare myself to a 5'10", 11, a 5'10", or a 5'11" model and her physique and her size. It's, keeping my mind right with why I'm doing what I'm doing. And again, I'm the first one to say, seeing the result, it takes time. I've talked about going through the hormones and becoming estrogen free, or, lowering my estrogen because I was so estrogen dominant. That took time. That took so much time. And then adding back progesterone and testosterone, which again is another episode, but that took time. That did not happen overnight. And this, post heart attack journey that I've been on, especially when like I said, I learned that burnout is 1 to 3 years, and I was so burnt out on many, many levels. I'm, just now being able to talk about it and bring it to the forefront and, use tips and strategies and tools and talk about it with other people. That took me a really, really long time. There's so many, it's multifaceted. Again, sleep, food, movement, your narrative, your love for yourself, letting go of old habits, letting go of old narratives, and doing that every day. And sometimes I get burnout with that. Not to the level that I was with the heart attack, but sometimes I just have to stop with the noise. There's so much noise, especially in the fitness world. There's a lot of noise. And sometimes you're scrolling, or I'm scrolling when I shouldn't be. And I'm so frustrated that I haven't had any progress. And I just want to see something change. And then you come across the be all end all supplement. And it's like, oh my gosh, I want to buy that. I want it to just work. And even though I know in my right mind, nothing like that exists. It's not going to happen. Don't spend the $60, $80, $120 for that supplement because it's not going to do what you want it to do. You need to just keep putting in the reps. And again, I know by the way I feel. I know by my lab markers. I know by the energy that I have, how my pants fit. There are things changing. It's just taking a really long time. So when that toddler acts up and she wants that Oreo, sometimes I just give it to her because I have that mentality of I've earned it. I've earned this. And I think we should change that, or I should change that to, let's make this decision on how I'm going to feel about it. If I'm okay with it, and this is my, first cookie in a very long time, and I know my blood sugar is okay and it's not going to disrupt my sleep, if I start asking myself those kinds of questions, little by little, I decide I don't want it. The toddler, she goes into her corner. I decide I have the power that I don't need it. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. But a lot of times, if I ask myself, what is it I'm trying to accomplish here? And how am I going to feel after I do this? Yeah, sometimes hurts so good, I'm doing it anyway. F it. But sometimes it does make me stop in my tracks and go, no, I don't want to have to bolus more insulin. I don't want to have to disrupt my sleep. I don't want to feel, that sugar crash. But I have to talk inside talk about it, because if I don't, I revert to F it right away, but then I beat myself up. The cookie wasn't the problem. It's what comes after with the guilt and the spiral. And then that leads to the next day of, oh, who cares? I already messed up. And then the next time, and the next time, and the next. I have to shut it down. And what am I trying to accomplish, and how am I going to feel? Those are the simple questions that you should ask yourself if you are trying to get into a frame of mind where it's not a diet, it is a lifestyle change, and why are you doing it? And again, that's been, like I said, I call myself out. That's been extremely hard for me. I'm still a work in progress. I'm still doing it. When this podcast started, I used to say that I'm not the before picture, certainly not the after picture. I'm the little black line in between that divides the two pictures. But that space is really big, and I'm still figuring it out. Some people, it happens overnight, it seems. But I also don't think that's true. That's what they maybe portray. I don't think you saw the nights standing in front of the refrigerator. I don't think you saw the nights where they cried because they did step on the scale and this, for some reason, they gave power to that number. I don't think you've seen the work that they put in, and now all of a sudden they've had this huge transformation, because it does take work. It does take time. It does, going and changing your body physique is not something that is going to happen very quickly. Maybe quicker in some than in others, and I'm the others, but it's going to take consistency. And again, I also believe, and this really does set with a lot of people, I think, but I do believe that how you talk to yourself, how you love yourself, and why you choose the things that you do and keeping your promises to yourself, I think that also has a lot to do with the physical physique. And what I mean by that is if you're kinder to your body's going to receive that, and it's going to work 10 times harder for you. But if you're just telling your body what a piece of shit, or you can't do this, or oh my gosh, how many times are you going to step on that scale before you break it? If you have this negative, bad narrative that you're telling yourself, I'm not sure that the physical part is going to want to let go of that trauma. It's not going to want to let go of what's inside. It's going to hang on to that fat because you're not being very nice. What's the old saying? If a friend came to you and said, "Oh gosh, I've been trying so hard to change everything." And again, I'm not talking diets. I'm not talking a juice cleanse or whatever the other, famous fad is of the week. I'm not talking that. I'm talking about they're putting in the work. They're trying to change their habits. They want a lifestyle change, not a diet. And they come to you and they say, "Oh man, I really overdid it yesterday. We went to Mexican food. I didn't get the fajitas. I had the full-blown enchiladas with the margarita and the chips and salsa. Man, I can't believe I failed." Are you going to tell your friend, best friend, sister, cousin, mom, aunt, are you going to tell them, "Oh my gosh, you're such a failure"? Yeah, you're right. How could you even think that you could go on? No. So why do we say that to ourselves? Why do we encourage and prop up and say, "Oh my gosh, it's one meal, you'll be okay. Continue to do the work that you're doing. You're doing great. The effort is not for nothing." But to ourselves, we're like, "Yeah, you piece of shit. You had margarita and chips and salsa. What do you think's going to happen now?" No. We should be talking to ourselves with the same love that we're giving to the others that are coming to us for our encouragement. We should be encouraging ourselves. So, I know that was a little off topic for what we normally talk about on the podcast, but I really felt like it was something to be said. Again, I don't veer into the fitness and nutrition a whole lot. I am more about the wellness with chronic illness and the overall wellness of the body, but it kind of overlapped today. And I think talking about building habits and good inside, dialogue is really what I think is super important. Okay, so this week's messy moment, because we're working on our inner dialogue, give yourself permission to leave one thing undone this week. Just give yourself permission to leave one thing undone. How did it make you feel? Did you give yourself more grace than maybe needed to leave other things undone? Or was that enough for you to realize you have the power to choose? And how did that make you feel? All right, that's it for this week. And thank you so much for listening. And as always, keep it messy. Thanks for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Whew, if you made it this far, give yourself a gold star or at least a nap. Honestly, if you showed up today and you were listening, you've already crushed it. I'm so grateful for you listening. If anything hit home, share it, tag me, write it on a sticky note. I don't care. Just don't keep all of this messy goodness to yourself. You can find me on Instagram at Everything's Messy Wellness or over at my website, everythingsmessywellness.com, where I've got resources, coaching, and probably a new rant about blood sugar or something that's just nonsense. It's all waiting for you. Check out my YouTube channel. I've got all of my podcast episodes up there. And I'm on X at Everything's Mess. Or if you just want to send me an email, Sarah at everythingsmessywellness.com. Look, until next time, hydrate, take no crap, and as always, keep it messy.